Listen to me. Before God shifts your life, He shakes it. Before He opens a door, He tests if you're ready to walk through it. Some of you have been asking, God, when is my breakthrough coming? But let me tell you something. You don't just wake up to a blessing, you walk through a process. And when something big is coming, God starts showing you signs. When God is about to give you something big, He doesn't just hand it to you, He prepares you for it. And one of the first ways He does that is through divine disruption. This is when everything in your life starts to feel unstable, unpredictable, and unfamiliar. You may find yourself in situations where things that once made sense no longer do. Relationships shift, careers take unexpected turns, and the path you thought was leading you somewhere suddenly comes to an abrupt stop. It can feel confusing, even frustrating, because it seems like life is unraveling. But in reality, God is clearing the way for something greater. Many times we get too comfortable in our current circumstances. We settle for jobs that pay the bills but don't fulfill our purpose. We stay in relationships that no longer align with who we are becoming. We hold on to old ways of thinking, afraid to step into the unknown. And God in His wisdom knows that we won't move unless He shakes us out of our comfort zone. That's why divine disruption isn't a sign that things are falling apart. It's a sign that God is building something new. Think about Joseph in the Bible. One day he was his father's favorite son, living a life of security. The next, he was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and later imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. From the outside, it looked like his life was being destroyed, but in reality, God was positioning him for something greater. Every disruption in Joseph's life was a step toward his destiny, becoming second in command over all of Egypt. If Joseph had never been thrown into that pit, he never would have reached the palace. Now let's bring this to you. Maybe you just lost a job. Maybe a friendship you thought would last forever is suddenly strained. Maybe doors that once opened for you are now tightly shut, and you're sitting there wondering, God, what is happening? Why does it feel like everything I built is crumbling? But what if God is not destroying your life, but redirecting it? What if the very thing you're grieving is the thing God is using to push you toward your next level? The challenge with divine disruption is that it never feels like a blessing while you're in it. It feels like loss, like rejection, like confusion. You pray for clarity, but things only seem to get more uncertain. You ask God for favor, but instead you experience resistance. But here's the thing. God doesn't always give us comfort when He's preparing us for something greater. Sometimes He allows the discomfort to grow so strong that we have no choice but to step into the unknown. Look at how eagles teach their young to fly. When it's time for the baby eagle to leave the nest, the mother doesn't gently guide it out. No, she starts removing the soft feathers and twigs that make the nest comfortable. She makes it so uncomfortable that the baby has no choice but to spread its wings and fly. That's what God does with divine disruption. He removes what's familiar. He allows certain things to shake, not because He wants to harm you, but because He wants to force you to fly. Some of the greatest blessings in life don't come when things are easy. They come when things are shaken. They come when the path you thought you were on gets blocked and you have no choice but to seek a new one. They come when people you depended on walk away and you finally realize that God is your source, not man. They come when you stop holding on to what's comfortable and start embracing the unknown. If you're in a season where everything feels uncertain, where things that once made sense no longer do, pay attention. God might not be punishing you, He might be preparing you. When God is about to release something big into your life, the enemy takes notice. And the moment you step closer to your breakthrough, resistance increases. This is not ordinary opposition, it's unusual resistance. Situations that were once smooth suddenly become difficult. People who supported you before now doubt you. You experience unexpected setbacks, delays, and obstacles that seem designed to wear you down. It feels like a constant battle, and you begin to wonder, why is everything so hard all of a sudden? The truth is, whenever God is about to elevate you, the enemy will try to discourage you. He wants you to quit before you reach the promise. That's why right before a major shift, you'll notice an increase in spiritual warfare. You'll feel pressure from every direction. Your confidence might start to waver. Doubt will creep into your mind, making you question if you're even on the right path. But what if the resistance isn't a sign that you should stop? What if it's confirmation that you're closer than ever? Look at the story of Moses when he was sent to deliver the Israelites from Egypt. He didn't walk into Pharaoh's court and get an easy yes. No, Pharaoh resisted. He made things harder. He increased the burden on the Israelites. What should have been a quick exit turned into a long battle. Why? Because freedom was coming. The enemy knew that once the Israelites stepped into the promised land, they would become unstoppable. So he fought as hard as he could to keep them trapped. That's exactly what happens in our lives. The moment you decide to step into purpose, resistance shows up. The moment you decide to pursue your dreams, obstacles appear. The moment you commit to living in faith, doubt creeps in. The enemy doesn't fight what isn't a threat. If you weren't on the verge of something big, he wouldn't be trying so hard to stop you. And it's not always external resistance, it's internal too. Fear becomes louder. Thoughts of inadequacy flood your mind. Suddenly you start questioning whether you're really capable, whether you really heard God correctly, whether you should just give up and settle for less. That's the enemy's strategy. If he can't stop you physically, he'll try to stop you mentally. Think about Nehemiah. When he set out to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, opposition came immediately. People ridiculed him, they tried to intimidate him, they plotted against him, hoping he would give up. But instead of backing down, Nehemiah stayed focused. He kept working. He understood that resistance was part of the process. Some of you are in that same battle right now. You're stepping into something new, but everything feels harder than before. Doors are closing. Opportunities seem delayed. The people around you don't understand why you're fighting so hard. But hear me. Resistance is often proof that you're exactly where you need to be. If what you were doing didn't matter, there wouldn't be a fight. It's like a woman in labor. The closer she gets to delivering her baby, the more intense the contractions become. The pain increases right before the birth. If she judged the situation based on the struggle, she might think something is wrong. But in reality, the struggle is a sign that the promise is about to be born. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history came after intense resistance. David had to fight Goliath before he became king. Jesus had to endure the cross before the resurrection. Every major victory requires a battle. The enemy fights hardest when he knows he's about to lose, and if you're facing unusual resistance, that means something big is on the way. Divine isolation, when God pulls you away before promotion. When God is about to give you something big, one of the most unexpected signs is divine isolation. This is when God begins to separate you from people, places, and things that no longer align with where He's taking you. It's a season where friendships shift, certain relationships fade, and you may feel like you're walking alone. You reach out to people who were always there, but suddenly they don't respond the same way. Conversations that used to flow now feel forced. The places that once felt like home no longer give you peace. And in that moment, it's easy to feel abandoned. But what if God isn't isolating you to punish you? What if He's isolating you to prepare you? Think about Jesus before He started His public ministry. He didn't go straight from the baptism to performing miracles. No, He was led into the wilderness for 40 days, a time of complete separation, a time of testing, prayer, and preparation. It wasn't a punishment. It was a process. And if the Son of God had to go through a season of divine isolation before stepping into His calling, why do we think we won't? Sometimes we hold on to people who are only meant to be in certain chapters of our lives, but when God is getting ready to elevate you, He will begin removing distractions. Some people can't go where God is taking you. Some relationships were only meant to be part of your past, not your future. And when God sees you holding on to something that could slow you down, He will step in and remove it. It may hurt, but it's necessary. Look at Joseph. Before he became a ruler in Egypt, he had to go through a season of isolation. His own brothers sold him into slavery. The very people who should have supported him were the ones who betrayed him. He went from being surrounded by family to being completely alone in a foreign land. But that isolation positioned him for his promotion. If Joseph had stayed in his father's house, he never would have made it to Pharaoh's palace. That's what divine isolation does. It separates you from what is comfortable so that you can step into what is greater. And one of the hardest things about this season is that the people who leave may not even be bad people. Some of them genuinely care about you. Some of them have been part of your journey for years. But not everyone is meant to go to the next level with you. Some connections were only meant for a season, and when that season ends, God will start shifting things. But here's where it gets tough. When God isolates you, He doesn't always explain it right away. He doesn't give you a list of reasons why certain people had to go. He just removes them, and it's up to you to trust Him. If you're not careful, you'll spend so much time grieving what's lost that you miss what God is doing. You'll try to reopen doors that God has shut. You'll try to force relationships that no longer fit. But when God isolates you, it's because He is protecting you. Think about an eagle. When it's time for the baby eagle to grow, the mother pushes it out of the nest. It's not because she wants to harm it. It's because she knows it was never meant to stay in the nest forever. Some of you are experiencing divine isolation, and it feels like God is pushing you out of everything familiar. Friendships are changing. You feel disconnected. But what if God is pushing you because it's time to fly? One of the clearest signs that God is about to do something big in your life is when you experience intense spiritual warfare. It feels like everything is coming at you from every direction, physically, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. It's not just small challenges here and there. It's an all-out war against your peace, your purpose, and your faith. You wake up feeling drained before the day even begins. You pray, but the answers seem delayed. You try to move forward, but obstacles appear out of nowhere. This kind of warfare is not a coincidence. It's a clear indicator that you are on the verge of something great. The enemy doesn't fight people who aren't a threat. If you weren't stepping into something significant, you wouldn't be experiencing this level of resistance. The attacks increase because your destiny is close. Look at Job in the Bible. He was a man of great faith, but when God was about to elevate him to a new level of blessing, the enemy came after him with everything he had. Job lost his wealth, his health, and even his family. The attack was relentless, but what Job didn't realize was that his suffering was a setup for greater restoration. God allowed the test, but He never abandoned Job, and in the end, Job received double for his trouble, twice the blessing he had before. This is what happens in spiritual warfare. The enemy wants you to believe that you are alone. He wants you to think that God has forgotten you. But the very thing the enemy sends to break you is what God will use to bless you. When you are under attack, the first thing the enemy targets is your mind. He fills it with doubt, fear, and discouragement. He whispers lies, telling you that you're not good enough, that your dreams won't come to pass, that you should just give up. He wants you to be so mentally exhausted that you stop fighting, because the truth is, if he can control your thoughts, he can control your destiny. The second thing he targets is your relationships. Suddenly, the people closest to you start acting differently. Misunderstandings arise. Friendships that were strong start falling apart. Loved ones start doubting you, and you find yourself feeling isolated. This is a strategy of the enemy. He knows that when you feel alone, you are more likely to give in to fear. The third area of attack is your finances and opportunities. You may experience unexpected financial struggles, delays in your career, or closed doors that once seemed wide open. The enemy wants you to believe that God's promises aren't real. But what if the delay is just a test of your faith? What if God is allowing this struggle to prepare you for the increase that's coming? Even Jesus faced intense warfare before stepping into his calling. Right before his ministry began, he was led into the wilderness, where the enemy tried to tempt him at his weakest moment. The devil came at him 3 times, offering him shortcuts, trying to get him to doubt his identity. But Jesus fought back, not with emotions, but with the word of God. He didn't panic, he didn't give up, he stood firm. That is how you must fight in this season. The enemy wants you to focus on the problem, but you have to focus on the promise. You have to remind yourself that the battle is proof of the breakthrough. You have to recognize that when warfare intensifies, it's because you are stepping into something greater. One of the most frustrating signs that God is about to do something big in your life is when you start experiencing unusual delays and closed doors. You pray, you plan, you take action, and yet everything seems to be moving in slow motion, or worse, completely shutting down. You apply for jobs, but no offers come. You invest in relationships, but they don't work out. You step out in faith, but every door you knock on stays closed. It feels like you're running in circles, stuck in the same place, watching other people move forward while you're standing still. But what if those delays aren't denials? What if those closed doors aren't rejections, but redirections? What if God is holding you back because he's setting you up for something greater? Look at Moses and the Israelites. God promised them the promised land, yet they spent 40 years in the wilderness. Why? Not because God was unable to deliver them, but because they weren't ready yet. They had the promise, but they didn't have the mindset to step into it. So God allowed delays to shape them, to prepare them, to teach them how to rely on him. This is what happens in seasons of waiting. God isn't punishing you, he's preparing you. Sometimes we pray for blessings that our character isn't ready to handle yet. We ask for the opportunity, but we haven't developed the discipline. We ask for the relationship, but we haven't healed from our past. So God allows delays to grow us into the person who can handle the next level. Another reason doors close is because we are trying to force something that isn't meant for us. We chase opportunities that were never part of God's plan. We hold on to relationships that were only meant for a season. We get frustrated when things don't work out, but in reality, God is protecting us from settling for less than his best. Think about Jonah. God told him to go to Nineveh, but he ran in the opposite direction. He boarded a ship heading away from his calling, and what happened? A storm came. The ship started sinking, and Jonah was thrown into the sea. That storm wasn't random, it was God closing a door that Jonah was never supposed to walk through. Sometimes the delays and the difficulties you face are God's way of saying, you're heading the wrong way. I have something better. Then there's the story of Joseph. He had dreams of greatness, but before he could step into his purpose, he faced one closed door after another. Betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned. Every step looked like a setback, but it was actually a setup. Each delay positioned him closer to his destiny. If Joseph had never been thrown into prison, he never would have met the person who would later introduce him to Pharaoh. And if he had never met Pharaoh, he never would have stepped into his purpose as the second in command of Egypt. Sometimes what looks like a delay is actually divine positioning. What feels like rejection is actually redirection. When God is about to bless you with something big, he will often close every other door so that you have no choice but to walk through the right one. But in those moments, you have to trust him. You have to believe that if something isn't working out, it's because God has something greater in store. One of the clearest signs that God is about to do something big in your life is a deep, unshakable restlessness within you. It's not just dissatisfaction, it's a holy discomfort, a sense that where you are is no longer where you're meant to be. The job you once loved now feels empty. The friendships that used to fulfill you now seem shallow. The life that once made sense now feels out of alignment. You can't explain it, but something inside of you is shifting. This kind of restlessness isn't random. It's divine. It's God pulling you out of comfort zones and calling you into something greater. Before he moves you into a new season, he makes sure you no longer fit in the old one. You try to ignore it, but you can't shake the feeling that you were made for more. Look at Abram before he became Abraham. He was settled in his homeland, comfortable in his familiar surroundings. But then God spoke, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." Abram had no idea where he was going, but he felt the call. He felt the restlessness, the need to move, even when nothing around him made sense. And when he obeyed, God made him into the father of many nations. Restlessness is a sign that your current level can no longer contain your calling. When a bird outgrows its nest, it can no longer stay where it once felt safe. It doesn't mean the nest was bad, it just means the bird was meant to fly. Some of the frustration you feel in this season isn't because things are going wrong, but because you've outgrown where you are. This is why people in your life may not understand what's happening to you. They see you pulling away. They see you questioning things. They see you no longer satisfied with what used to excite you, and they wonder if something is wrong. But the truth is, nothing is wrong. God is calling you higher. You're shifting from what was to what will be. Even Jesus experienced this moment. Before his public ministry began, he spent 30 years in preparation. Can you imagine what that must have felt like, knowing you were born to change the world, yet having to wait in obscurity? Knowing you were destined for something greater, yet living an ordinary life. But when the time came, Jesus felt the shift. He knew the season of waiting was over, and he stepped fully into his calling. That's what restlessness is. It's a divine indicator that your waiting season is ending. You're no longer meant to sit still. God is pushing you forward, preparing you for something greater. But here's the challenge. When this shift happens, you will be tempted to cling to the familiar. You will want to hold on to old patterns, old places, and old mindsets because they feel safe. But safety and purpose don't always go together. If you want to step into what God has for you, you have to be willing to let go of what's behind you. Think about a mother eagle teaching her young to fly. She doesn't wait for the baby bird to feel ready. She disturbs the nest. She makes it uncomfortable so that staying is no longer an option. And eventually, the baby bird is forced to spread its wings. That's what God is doing in your life right now. The discomfort isn't punishment, it's preparation. The uneasiness isn't a mistake, it's a message. You are being called to something greater, and the restlessness you feel is proof that you can't stay where you are. When God is about to do something big in your life, he will shake things up. He will remove people, close doors, allow battles, stir up a deep restlessness, and push you into unfamiliar territory, not to break you, but to build you. The frustration, the uncertainty, the discomfort, it's not a sign that you're losing, it's a sign that you're on the brink of something greater. God doesn't elevate without preparation. He doesn't bless without pruning. He doesn't shift your life without first shifting your spirit. So if you're in a season where everything feels uncertain, trust that he is working behind the scenes. The delays are divine, the losses are lessons, the struggles are shaping you. Don't fight the process. Don't resist the change. What's ahead is bigger than what's behind. And when the time is right, what God has prepared for you will unfold in ways beyond what you ever imagined. Stay faithful, stay ready, because something big is coming.